Hey everyone, I hope you're doing really well. Welcome back to Strengths of Being Dyslexic in Golf. I hope you enjoyed our catch-up video that we did last week. And also, it's just been Neurodiversity Week, so it's actually quite cool that we've got our guest here today. So Neil, I'm going to pass over to you to introduce our guest.
Yeah, so thanks, Leah. We've got Alice Davis, which is a professional golfer at Parkstone Golf Course, close down where I am, down the south coast. So I messaged, I had something on my stories, and it was about dyslexia on my Instagram stories, and it was about dyslexia. And Alice, you messaged me about it, and you said you wanted it. You wanted to post that, I think, doesn't it? You said I'm pinching that. So that was, and that's why I asked. And it turns out you're dyslexic, which I didn't know about you. I knew of you, and I've seen you playing and practicing golf. So what's your story?
So I wasn't diagnosed as dyslexic until after I left school. So my parents raised it with my sort of teacher when I was in year 7, 8, 9. I went to the local grammar school, so it was almost like through primary I kind of sort of dealt with it, so it wasn't really ever brought up then. But my parents sort of had some inklings when I was sort of in year 7 and that, and brought it up with my English teacher. No, she's fine. So you sort of kind of trust a teacher, and they're sort of, if they say, no, she's fine, you accept it. So sort of went through, did my GCSEs, did my A-levels, sort of without being diagnosed. And sort of when I was doing my A-levels, I think I only probably finished 2 or 3 of my A-levels actually in time. So obviously I lose out on marks, and I'm sort of almost, and that's rushing, thinking I'm going to be tight for time. So it obviously hindered me sort of then. And my brother sort of was the same. My parents sort of took it upon themselves and got him tested just before he did his A-levels, because sort of some things came to light during his GCSEs. So we were diagnosed at the same time, but for him, he was able to then bring it into his sort of A-levels as well. But we're both quite different with our dyslexia. I think I was able to hide it quite well, because when I was younger, I did a lot of I went to drama school, so I did a lot of sort of drama and theatre stuff. So I was sort of used to learning scripts and things like that. So I was used to talking in public. I was used to having to learn stuff. So if I had a script, if you gave it to me for the first time and asked me to read it, I wouldn't read what was written in front of me. I would sort of end up skipping words, but it would still make sense to someone that was listening. But when you actually read what was in front of you, it wasn't what was there. But once I've sort of gone over something a couple of times, I'm absolutely fine. So it was just someone that, you just need to read it first. So it wasn't almost a big deal for me then. But when sort of, as I got older, reading books, things like that, I'd noticed that I was a lot slower at finishing a book when doing my GCSE English, for example. Like, people are like, oh yeah, I've finished now. And I'm like, well, I'm like not even halfway through. So it was frustrating when I was sort of in early years and sort of it wasn't really picked up on. Does that make sense?
No, you sound very similar to me. And I think there is a difference between girls and boys with dyslexia. I think I mentioned this when we had Naz on, and boys tend to misbehave or play up. So then these things get picked up, whereas girls don't tend to do that. I don't want to stereotype. You don't. Oh, like you said, we're very good at masking it or hiding it or finding a way around the solution. So compensating by talking, public speaking, or we can read it first and then almost memorize. I feel like I do that. I have to memorize words rather than know what they are. If that makes sense. Like when I got picked up in primary school, and being taught phonetics was just no go. I just can't do the sounding out. I just doesn't work for me at all. So I literally have to memorize something, and I'm saying a word and I don't necessarily understand what it means, but I'm just saying it because that's what I've remembered, which is why I am slow at reading, because what you're doing is going for your memory banks. You're literally going to the back of your brain to bring the word that you've memorized, which is why it takes a bit more time to read the page, which is why that's one of the reasons I found that out. I got told that, which was like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Starts to make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, which is then why if you get diagnosed, you should be given extra time in exams, so you have that extra time to read the question.
Yeah, exactly. Like for me, that extra time would have made a big difference, because I would have then actually been able to take my time reading the questions, take my time over sort of reading through my questions and things like that at the end. My brother's dyslexia is different, so the extra time he got it, but it wouldn't have helped him as much. Once he misreads something once, he'll keep misreading it sort of the same way. So naturally, even though I don't like to admit it, he is more intelligent than me. So that's how he was able to sort of compensate, because he was clever. It almost wasn't quite picked up on. But it was sort of when it came to exams, if he misread a question, he might put a perfect answer for an incorrect question. So that's where it's almost frustrating for him. So like when he was doing his university degree, he wouldn't be able to proofread in the same day he'd written something. He'd have to leave it a few days. So that's where his is different. He's got to leave it a bit, whereas me, it's just time. I just need that extra time to actually be able to read it, which I then actually had when I was doing my PGA. I actually had that extra time for those exams, which was a huge benefit.
Awesome. That's really cool, and it's just interesting that your sibling has it as well, and you're naming that difference. We've discovered that talking to lots of people how diverse and different it is, and why some get picked out, why some don't get picked up, and I think that's why we're doing this, to try and shed a bit of life. But don't say you're not intelligent or your brother's more intelligent than you. I don't buy that.
Still got to grammar school, it's fine.
Okay, is he a golf pro?
He's not a golf pro. He's a golfer. Well, we're very similar level, but he decided to go down a different route.
So there you go. You're more intelligent in golf.
Exactly.
Excellent. So how would you say your dyslexia has given you an advantage, or how do you use it to your strength? How do you turn it into a strength rather than seeing it as a weakness?
I think for me, it almost allows me to, I think when I'm working with beginners and juniors, almost simplify things, because sort of I understand that sometimes it's harder to take in lots of information in one go. I really sort of break it down into really simple, easy steps for them to learn. I don't bombard them with information, so I could sort of appreciate whether my pupil's dyslexic or not. For a beginner, they don't want loads and loads and loads of information. Exactly. So I think it's made me appreciate, like, right, one step at a time, we'll do this. Do you understand it? Now let's move on. If they say to me, I can take in loads of information, throw it all at me, I can. But if it's someone that's like, right, let's take it steady, I think it's made me appreciate that a lot more, especially working a lot with juniors and beginners.
No, definitely, 100%. I think whether you're a golfer learning and whether you have dyslexia or not, you shouldn't really be having more than 2 pieces of information at one time, even if they do say, throw it at me. My husband's a classic for this. He's, I'm very knowledgeable about the golf swing layer. Oh, I hate it when he says that, because he might be, but we know as players and coaches, you have to do things in a set order, and you need to work on maybe 1 or 2 things first before you can get to that third bit. So it's almost no point looking at that third bit until you've got stages 1 and 2 in place first. And then we know when you get those stages in, that third one kind of takes care of itself. And I feel like that with my dyslexia. I get one thing right, so maybe take extra time to read, or get the computer to read it for me, and then that kind of takes everything else into shape. It puts it all into shape for me, so you don't have to worry. I think we found that a lot with every coach that's come on here talking about simplifying, haven't we, Neil?
Yeah, we'll make it. So I'd like the expression, what was it? Einstein said about, if you can't teach it to a 5-year-old, then there's no, what you're trying to say is you're trying to say it to a 5-year-old. I think he was suggested about it. I quite like that idea. What I was going to say was, you went through a test. You went, your parents put you through the test, a dyslexic test, at an early stage, I think. So both Leah and I would, we were tested during the PGA. You done it through the A levels, I think.
Yes, yeah, so I did it. My parents sort of got it done privately once it must have been pretty much just before I did my PGA first year exams. So they sort of got my brother tested in, because they were like, right, we need to get this sorted before he does his A levels. So they got him sort of sorted, and he came back as dyslexic. And they were like, well, he's dyslexic, Alice is going to be dyslexic. They could see some similarities, but almost, I'd say mine were more stereotypical dyslexic traits, almost what people that don't necessarily understand that there's loads of different types of dyslexia would associate with dyslexic. Misreading, slow at reading, they're very stereotypical, really. So yeah, so you said you were tested during the PGA?
Yeah. So we kind of, my parents knew that I was dyslexic, which is, I was a bit sort of disappointed for the
I apologise that my gardener is here. If you could hear that big garden noise, I'll go around the back in a second. I'll mute myself for a minute.
Is that your husband, your gardener? The gardener's son?
I wouldn't trust my husband to do any gardening, even though his mum's a gardener, but yeah, I'll mute myself for a second.
It was the so I'd done a lot of extra classes during my school years, but I didn't have any tests. I didn't know there was after test. I didn't know you have to have a test to do your sort of like higher education. And so I think Leo's very much like this, where he's very passionate with like trying to get over or help the schools, trying to, if Alice, if you were sort of a younger Alice, where do you think you could have had the help earlier? Like at a school, was the school should have sort of like highlighted it up a little bit, and then you could have had that extra help, and you wouldn't have been so frustrated during your class.
It's like I'm some of the teachers that I went to school with, and sort of when I said to them I'm dyslexic, they were surprised, but also they were like, actually we can see it. And I think for me it was that frustration that like getting diagnosed later is like, I could have got better GCSE grades than I did, and I could have actually finished those exams in time. So it was almost like, what would I have been able to have achieved? Like what I achieved was great, but it's like, what could I have achieved if I actually had the support that I didn't know I needed them, but that I needed. So I think that's almost a frustrating thing for me. Obviously, to do the PGA, I had the qualifications, because 5 GCSEs or whatever to do the PGA. So I was absolutely fine for doing the PGA, but it's almost like what could I have done? Like I would have always gone down this route. It wasn't I can't go off and do a university degree, I'm going to go and do the PGA instead. It's I did what I wanted to do, regardless of what my grades were. But almost just for myself, it would have been nice to have known, like, what could I have done?
Yeah, especially if your parents raised it and you raised it to teachers and they still kind of not discard it but overlooked it. I'm going to say, and this is what's been happening, a lot of schools don't have the funds or resources, so it's easier for them to kind of go, no, she's going to achieve something, so she's not going to flat out fail, so we'll just say she's fine. They probably know, but it's one of those things, and that's one thing I want to try and change. Take on the world, but it would just be nice for somehow any kid with learning difficulties, if they can get some additional support from somewhere. I know it's so hard with state schools, they only have X amount of budget, X amount of resources, so they can't do it all. But if there was a way that government could step in and do external things, I think it'd just be such a game changer, because there's so many children and adults, young adults, who are so highly intelligent, but just the way they learn and put information out there is just a little bit different. And it is frustrating. There's so many people with such a high IQ who are dyslexic, but they could be seen as really, you know, not the cleverest because they can't do it in a certain way or the standardized way. That's what I think frustrates me the most, is we are told we have to be a certain way on an ideal that was set 200 years ago.
Yeah,
there's too many things that are out of date, and I think hopefully one day this might do it, guys. We'll do it. But I think already the conversation's there, so that's good, and we're getting more and more people like yourself coming on and talking about it, which is great. That's what we want to, you know, that's what we want to do, is instill confidence and don't be ashamed of it, or you know, just kind of settle for second best for something. Because I know a couple of friends who've gone, oh, I can't do it, I'm not clever enough, I'll just do this path instead, and that is not the answer at all. You should be able to do what you want, but you just have to get the right support and help to get there. I think there's nothing wrong with that at all.
No, exactly. I almost think, like, I almost had to teach myself the sort of the ways to cope and get over stuff. Like, I remember when I was doing my A-levels in sort of my business and economics classes, the teacher used to give us a sort of piece, and then she'd be like, right, highlight the important information, and she'd come over to me and she'd be like, you've highlighted everything. But it was all, and she was like, apart from ands, a's and the, you've highlighted pretty much everything on the sheet. What's the important information? But I think for me, when reading through stuff, almost highlighting the main bits as I went along, almost it helped me almost take it in. And almost for me, it was all important information, because it was all then almost sinking in a lot easier. I found for me, almost doing sort of spider diagrams and everything in colour helped me, almost making it more creative and visual, as opposed to some of my friends, they'd literally sit there and write pages and pages and pages for revision, which that didn't work for me, that didn't sink in. So almost, I think without realising, I sort of picked up on my own techniques for what worked for me best. And whereas obviously if I'd had the help, maybe they would have guided me and going, why don't you try this?
No, definitely. Well, one of the testing is to read and write on different coloured paper. I had that. I was more like pastel colours, lighter colours, and one technique for that is like flashcards, colour flashcards. I did that during my PGA, just everywhere, all over the walls, different things in different colour codes. So like when we had to learn, it's obviously your impact factors, I would have the impact factors in blue, but then the swing principles in red colour. So then when I sat the exam, I thought blue, and I could picture it on the wall, and then the red. So technique for anyone to try. I think it's pretty clever, but there we go. But yeah, you probably would have had those techniques shown to you if you'd had the help in school, but you've kind of found out in your own way. But actually that's really good.
Which is
that's good for coaching. Yeah, it's good for coaching stuff like that. I bet your lessons are really colourful. So the kids
lessons, and it's almost, I try and make them sort of creative, because obviously when I teach a lot of kids, and when you've got big classes, all the pupils don't learn in the same way. You've got some that will learn from just listening to you, some like any pupil, whether they're a junior or an adult. So it's almost every lesson, it's like, right, we're going to get the cue cards out today and we're going to do this. And it makes it up, it keeps it fun for all the kids as well, learning in different ways. But I almost think, like, when I'm teaching the kids as well, sometimes it comes up in conversation. I go, yeah, I'm dyslexic. And some of them are quite surprised, and they go, well, so am I. And they're like, oh, I didn't realise you were. And I almost think, kids don't talk about it, almost because they're made to feel maybe ashamed by it. But it's almost like when they hear that, well, my golf coach is dyslexic, I didn't realise she's dyslexic. And I think obviously you saw my Instagram post. So many people, like, and our members at the golf club, they were like, we would never have known. And that's the thing, it's like, it's something I talk about, but it's not something that maybe comes up in everyday conversation. But I think it's almost making a point, especially with kids, to talk about it and to make them aware of it. And actually, there's a lot of people that do have dyslexia.
Yeah, it's one in 10. So, for every 10 people, there's one person who's definitely got it. But then there's going to be in that 10 others with traits. There's always traits in there as well. And I like it. It's like you're taking ownership of your dyslexia, and I do the same. If it comes up in conversation, I will never shy away. I'll go, sorry, I'm dyslexic. That's why I've made this mistake. I'm really sorry. And same with the kids as well. In fact, there's a large proportion of my kids with dyslexia. In Reigate, there is a school for dyslexia, especially for dyslexic children, which is great, which is Moon Hall, and that's one place I want to try and get into, to try and again just show them that the possibilities are endless. You can really do anything you want. Like, don't let that moment in time define who you're going to be. I think that was the big frustration for me at school, was I was made to feel like I couldn't achieve what I wanted. And it's just absolutely nonsense. You really can. It's going to be hard. I'm going to sit and be like, yeah, it was well easy doing school. No, it wasn't. But I just decided that was it. I was going to get my grades, I was going to go do my PGA, I'm going to run a business, I'm going to be self-employed, I'm going to be able to do my tax return on time and properly. I could do this. But that's, you know, but it could have easily been the other way if it wasn't for my character, I guess, and just probably my parents.
If you just listened to what you were told, then, and almost how you were made to feel, then you could have very easily just gone, oh, well, I'll just see what happens. But almost having that character where you're like, no, this is my goal. This is what I want to do. What do I have to do to be able to achieve it? It's having that right attitude with it, really.
Definitely. Excellent. Well, Neil, is there anything you'd like to add? Oh, I think we've covered everything.
What's your strengths? I mean, I wanted to say, I remember just going back to your coloured paper, and you said that you highlighted. I completely forgot. When I was younger, we went through the stage of with Miss Dennison. She was my dyslexic helper, and she found out that orange was good to read. So then I decided to let's go sort of glasses. I had orange lens glasses. Yeah, didn't quite. I wouldn't recommend it, but it was just I don't know. Anyway, it's just one of those things. Just remembered that. What was I say? Was that? Yeah. What's your strengths? What do you think your strengths are? And obviously what we've learned from you is that you're using your dyslexic traits, and you understood quickly, didn't you? How you work and how you work best way. So what do you think your strengths are in terms of your dyslexic?
I'd say I think like my strengths are that almost it makes me take my time. Actually it allows me to, well, it doesn't allow me to. I understand that actually it stops me from rushing things. It makes me pause, think about what I'm doing, even in sort of everyday life. It's like, right, let's think about it before I do it. So I almost think that sort of traits helps me with anything dyslexic side, but generally as well. And it almost just makes me sort of take a second and think about things really before actually doing it.
I guess it means you pay more attention to detail if you're taking your time, so you don't miss anything, or you'll end up going like the extra mile. I think that's really good. That's really important, actually, as a junior golf coach. 100%.
Yeah, it just makes you almost like I've seen some people sort of over the years, and like they'll go straight into a golf lesson. It's like, right, 2 golf swings. This is what we're going to do. It's like, no, let's take our time, step back. Obviously, a little bit like what the PGA teaches, but it's almost sometimes you get a pupil and you can see straight away what they're doing wrong, and you want to jump straight in. And I'm like, no, let's just take my time and make sure for definite that there's nothing else that's also impacting. So it almost makes me just slow everything down, whether I'm teaching or whatever.
Analytical, is that the right word? Sort of like you're analysing it in your, yeah.
Analytical,
that's right. So sorry, someone's at the door, I thought.
I love it.
In terms of awesome. You're reading, like, as in when you read something, you're taking it all in, aren't you? And that's maybe why you're slower than others, because you're absorbing a lot of information in on the process you're reading.
Yeah, it's like as we said with the whole reading thing, taking it all in. It's like I've been very known to read a sentence and sort of completely miss the meaning of it because I've missed one key word near the beginning, because my brain's got, oh, let's get to the end quickly. So it's that whole slowing down process, making sure I don't miss anything.
No, definitely. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Alice, for coming on and sharing your story, insight to what dyslexia is for you and your brother. Yeah. Sorry, bro. I hope you asked him. Talking about him. But that's been really interesting, hearing about that, two siblings close in age and how you've had slightly different stories and how they differ. I think that's a key thing there today, is showing that there is some diversity within this learning difficulty. And you know, teachers, if you're listening, somehow look for the signs. You know, if someone says, I think there's a problem, maybe listen to what they're saying. I think is the key. I think sometimes that's all we want, is just to be heard. Yeah. So the acknowledgement, and then you can have some help from there. So obviously, guys, we've only got 1 week until we return. So anyone watching this and in the Surrey area who are looking to get some lessons or any kids stuff, please let me know. And Neil, you're based down where? Salisbury, and Alice,
Parkstone.
There you go. So a bit of advertising as well. But seriously, guys, if anyone's in those areas, please hit us up and we can help you get back into your golfing journey as well.